Hello and welcome back to the novel study of the Phantom Tollbooth. Today we are doing Chapter 9. It's all in how you look at things. But first I'd like you to look at a few things on the map. So scroll up if you're online or turn to the beginning of the book, as I will do. And you can find Dictionopolis down in the south by the foothills of Confusion. And one final note, I don't think we ever really did the etymology fully of Dictionopolis. We did talk about opolis being a suffix that means a city or an urban area. And the Latin root at the beginning, dict, D-I-C-T, means to speak. So a city of speaking and writing, a city of words, Dictionopolis. And we are leaving Dictionopolis. So I would like you to look at the Latin root D-I-C-T in Dictionopolis and move your finger upward and you will see a place called Point of View, which is right before the Forest of Sight. Point of View is where we're headed today, and it is a major theme of this chapter. Now, you've probably heard of point of view before. We know that stories are written in different points of view. First person point of view is when the character writes it from their single perspective, I, me, mine. Second person point of view is when you say you, like a choose your own adventure book. And third person point of view is a narrator who is outside of the story, telling the story, watching it happen. They went to the store. He, she, it. Well, there's another kind of point of view, and that is the point of view that we as human beings have from our own perspective. And this is a lesson that Milo is going to be learning in this chapter. And the metaphor that I like to use to help you understand point of view is picture a classroom. Very easy. And you sitting at your desk have your own unique point of view that you can see the teacher from in your seat, and you feel a certain way, you had a certain amount of sleep that night, you ate something for breakfast. All of those things went into how you feel right now sitting in your desk looking at the teacher from your particular angle. And the angle that you see the teacher from is different than the person next to you. Even though they see almost the same angle, they see it slightly different. And then somebody on the other side of the room sees the teacher from a completely different point of view. Now, multiply that times every student in the room who has their own individual thoughts going in their heads, their own life histories. They had their own separate things for breakfast. They're all in a different mood for different reasons. And they're all sitting in a different place in the classroom. Every single one of those students is seeing the teacher from a different point of view. They're seeing the same thing from a different point of view. And the teacher also is seeing the classroom from his or her point of view. So you have in just one classroom all of these different points of view combined at once. Well, I want to go really deep on you and say that that's what reality is. Reality is all the different points of view of all the human beings and living creatures put together. All right, let's go to chapter 9 and learn a little more about point of view. Chapter 9. It's all in how you look at things. Soon all traces of Dictionopolis had vanished in the distance, and all those strange and unknown lands that lay between the kingdom of words and the kingdom of numbers stretched before them. It was late afternoon, and the dark orange sun floated heavily over the distant mountains. A friendly, cool breeze slapped playfully at the car, and the long shadows stretched out lazily from the trees and bushes. And in that last sentence, I'd like to point out that that's an example of personification, when you give an animal or object the qualities or abilities that only a human being can have. It's when you make something that is inanimate or not human, like an animal, and make it seem like it's a human being. So the author does this here by saying that the breeze slaps playfully and that the long shadows stretch out lazily. "Ah, the open road!" exclaimed the humbug, breathing deeply, for he now seemed happily resigned to the trip. "The spirit of adventure, the lure of the unknown, the thrill of a gallant quest. How very grand indeed!" Then, pleased with himself, he folded his arms, sat back, and left it at that. In a few more minutes, they had left the open countryside and driven into a dense forest. That means all the trees are really close together, really thick forest. "This is the scenic route, straight ahead to point of view," announced a rather large road sign. But, contrary to its statement, all that could be seen were more trees. As the car rushed along, the trees grew thicker and taller and leafier until, just as they had hidden the sky completely, the forest abruptly ended and the road bent itself around a broad promontory. So a promontory is like a piece of rock that comes off of a cliff, and you can actually stand on it and look out. So they're higher up. Everywhere that Milo had been traveling before, in the chapters we read before, he's now above that area and he's looking down on it. So he probably sees Dictionopolis out in the distance. But I like this symbolism in this paragraph. Milo's gone through some changes already and he's learned some things and he's on higher ground. It's almost like he's on the next level, just like we're in the next level of this book. "Remarkable view," announced the humbug, bouncing from the car as if he were responsible for the whole thing. "Isn't it beautiful?" gasped Milo. "Oh, I don't know," answered a strange voice. "It's all in the way you look at things." "I beg your pardon," said Milo, for he didn't see who had spoken. "I said, it's all in how you look at things," repeated the voice. Milo turned around and found himself staring at two very neatly polished brown shoes, for standing directly in front of him, if you can use the word standing for anyone suspended in mid-air, was another boy just about his age whose feet were easily 3 feet off the ground. And you can see the picture of the boy. "For instance," continued the boy, "if you happen to like deserts, you might not think this was beautiful at all." "That's true," said the humbug, who didn't like to contradict anyone whose feet were that far off the ground. Contradict is one of your vocabulary words, and you see the Latin root dict again, which means to speak or to say. Contra meaning the opposite of. So when you contradict somebody, it's when you say the opposite of what they're saying, or you're disagreeing with them by saying the opposite point of view. "For instance," said the boy again, "if Christmas trees were people and people were Christmas trees, we'd all be chopped down, put up in the living room, and covered with tinsel while the trees opened our presents." "What does that have to do with it?" asked Milo. "Nothing at all," he answered, "but it's an interesting possibility, don't you think?" "How do you manage to stand up there?" asked Milo, for this was the subject which most interested him. "I was about to ask you a similar question," answered the boy, "for you must be much older than you look to be standing on the ground." "What do you mean?" Milo asked. "Well," said the boy, "in my family, everyone is born in the air, with his head at exactly the height it's going to be when he's an adult, and then we all grow toward the ground. When we're fully grown up, or, as you can see, grown down, our feet finally touch. Of course, there are a few of us whose feet never reach the ground no matter how old we get, but I suppose it's the same in every family." Let's take a pause there, because you can visualize, imagine starting at the height that you're going to be as an adult and seeing everything from that point of view always, your entire life, and you just grow down. That is this boy. And he gives a very popular idiom in this paragraph, which is few of us whose feet never reach the ground. Now, there's actually two versions of this idiom. There's when both of your feet touch the ground, and when your feet don't touch the ground. So I'll start with when both of your feet are on the ground. It really means that you are able to remain in a calm, stable, sensible, and pragmatic, which means practical, state or condition. So it just means that you don't get emotional, you don't get upset, you have both feet on the ground, you think clearly. Now, if you say that somebody's feet don't touch the ground, it means that they're a daydreamer, they have trouble focusing, they have trouble with common sense and staying focused on a task because they're too much in their imagination, too distracted by their own thoughts. So we say that their feet don't touch the ground. He hopped a few steps in the air, skipped back to where he started, and then began again. You certainly must be very old to have reached the ground already. Oh, no, said Milo seriously. In my family, we all start on the ground and grow up, and we never know how far until we actually get there. What a silly system, the boy laughed. Then your head keeps changing its height, and you always see things in a different way? Why, when you're 15, things won't look at all the way they did when you were 10, and at 20, everything will change again. I suppose so, replied Milo, for he had never really thought about the matter. We always see things from the same angle, the boy continued. It's much less trouble that way. Besides, it makes more sense to grow down and not up. When you're very young, you can never hurt yourself falling down if you're in mid-air, and you certainly can't get into trouble for scuffing up your shoes or marking the floor if there's nothing to scuff them on and the floor is 3 feet away. That's very true, thought Tok, who wondered how the dogs in the family liked the arrangement. But there are many other ways to look at things, remarked the boy. For instance, you had orange juice, boiled eggs, toast and jam, and milk for breakfast, he said, turning to Milo. And you are always worried about people wasting time, he said to Tok. And you are almost never right about anything, he said, pointing at the humbug. And when you are, it's usually an accident. A gross exaggeration, protested the furious bug, who didn't realize that so much was visible to the naked eye. And there is another idiom that you should know for the quiz. The naked eye means that you can see it without the use of glasses or a microscope or a telescope. And when we say that something is visible to the naked eye, we mean that it can be seen clearly. Amazing, gasped Tok. How do you know all that? Asked Milo. Simple, he said proudly. I'm Alec Bings. I see through things. I can see whatever is inside, behind, around, covered by, or subsequent to anything else. In fact, the only thing I can see is whatever happens to be right in front of my nose. Isn't that a little inconvenient? Asked Milo, whose neck was becoming quite stiff from looking up. Let's pause there. Inconvenient is one of your vocabulary words up in front of you. And in the paragraph before that, we have two brand new idioms that you also need to know for the quiz. The first one is I see through things. Mr. Alec Bings, who sees through things. Now, in the book, the joke is that he literally sees through things, but when we say that as an idiom, if you say to somebody, I see through you, it means that you see the truth that they are hiding. You see what is really going on with them inside, what they're really up to. You see through things. When you see through things, you see to the truth of them, even if the truth is hidden. And the next idiom is right in front of my nose, which basically means that something is obvious because it's right there in front of your nose. Isn't that a little inconvenient? Asked Milo, whose neck was becoming quite stiff from looking up. It is a little, replied Alec,
but it is quite important to know what lies behind things, and the family helps me take care of the rest. My father sees two things, my mother looks after things, my brother sees beyond things, my uncle sees the other side of every question, and my little sister Alice sees under things."
"How can she see under things if she's all the way up there?" growled the humbug.
"Well," added Alec, turning a neat cartwheel, "whatever she can't see under, she overlooks."
Now, there are a lot of different puns in that last paragraph, but the one final joke that I want to point out is that whatever she can't see under, she overlooks. While to overlook something is to forget about it or to not notice it. And so if she can't look under something, she overlooks it, which is the joke there. And let's continue. "Would it be possible for me to see something from up there?" asked Milo politely.
"You could," said Alec, "but only if you try very hard to look at things as an adult does."
Milo tried as hard as he could, and as he did, his feet floated slowly off the ground until he was standing in the air next to Alec Bings. He looked around very quickly and, an instant later, crashed back down to earth again.
"Interesting, wasn't it?"
asked Alec. "Yes, it was," agreed Milo, rubbing his head and dusting himself off. "But I think I'll continue to see things as a child. It's not so far to fall."
"A wise decision, at least for the time being," said Alec. "Everyone should have his own point of view."
And there is a major theme stated directly by Alec. Everyone should have his own point of view. And by that logic, you should also respect everybody's unique point of view. And not only do we respect other people's points of views, but we have enough of an open mind to try to consider seriously other people's points of views and see if maybe our point of view may be incorrect. If it is, then we should be able to change our mind and change our beliefs and our point of view. On the other hand, we want to make sure that we don't just believe in everybody else's point of view and never have our own unique point of view. "Isn't this everyone's point of view?" asked Tok, looking around curiously.
"Of course not," replied Alec, sitting himself down on nothing. "It's only mine, and you certainly can't always look at things from someone else's point of view."
And even though it may be hard to see something from someone else's point of view, you always want to make the effort to try, because your point of view is not the only one, and the other person's point of view, even though it's different from yours, is just as important.
"For instance, from here, that looks like a bucket of water," he said, pointing to a bucket of water. "But from an ant's point of view, it's a vast ocean. From an elephant's, it's just a cool drink, and to a fish, of course, it's home. So you see, the way you see things depends a great deal on where you look at them from."
Just like our classroom metaphor.
"Now, come along and I'll show you the rest of the forest."
He ran quickly through the air, stopping occasionally to beckon Milo, Tok, and the humbug along, and they followed as well as anyone who had to stay on the ground could.
"Does everyone here grow the way you do?" puffed Milo when he had caught up. "Almost everyone," replied Alec, and then he stopped a moment and thought. "Now and then, though, someone does begin to grow differently. Instead of down, his feet grow up toward the sky, but we do our best to discourage awkward things like that."
"What happens to them?" insisted Milo.
"Hardly enough. They often grow 10 times the size of everyone else," said Alec thoughtfully, "and I've heard that they walk among the stars."
And with that, he skipped off once again toward the waiting woods. And that's it. Pretty short chapter. I like to call it a transition chapter because it's pushing us into Act 2, where things are going to get very, very interesting in Chapter 10. I'll see you next time.